Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of GlideChat, hosted by GlideFast. Today, we'll be having a discussion around configuration management and the importance of the CMDB to the foundation of the ServiceNow platform. My name is Mark Harper. I'm a solutions consultant here at GlideFast, and I've been working in this CMDB space for the better part of the last decade. With me today, I've also got Ashley Snyder and Paul Group. Ashley, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ashley Snyder. I'm a senior technical consultant with GlideFast. I've been working with the ServiceNow platform for about 5 years now, touched a lot of different areas in the platform. And I'll pass it to you, Paul.
Thanks, Ashley. So Paul Group, I'm our Director of Solutions Consulting here with GlideFast. I've got about 9 years of experience on the platform on all different aspects. I was also a former ServiceNow customer before coming over to GlideFast.
All right, fantastic. So thanks for joining us here today. And I'm sure people have come with all kinds of different experience levels when it comes to the CMDB. I'm sure people probably had their hands burnt a few times in the past. It can be a little bit of a tainted word, but I wanted to just have a quick open discussion about what your guys' experience has been with customers and their relations to the CMDB. Would they consider it a trusted vehicle, or is it just usually an afterthought when they come to implementing ITSM?
So I can go, I've worked for a couple of different customers in higher education and healthcare, and we actually didn't use discovery. I feel like, kind of getting discovery in those sectors, there's different laws like HIPAA and FERPA and things like that you have to kind of, be aware of. We didn't really use discovery, so we were doing a lot of, integration setup, maybe even manual loading. And when you do that, there is that operational work and that development work that has to happen. That kind of discovery does a little bit for you, which was nice. So that's kind of been my experience.
Yeah, and I had kind of the same experience from the customer standpoint. For some reason, whatever it may be, there wasn't a lot of value seen in having the CMDB, so we actually didn't have any. We didn't have anything in there. So we actually, my first customer, we kind of just flew blinds. And then kind of getting into the partner ecosystem and understanding, how important the CMDB is, it's really made you kind of eye-opening from, when I look at what I did in the past for the customer, an aspect of why didn't we have one? How did we really run our business and understand things? So, and I think, Mark, with your kind of expertise and your, multiple years of focusing and discovery at CMDB, can you talk to us a little bit about, how has it changed over the years? What have you seen in that life cycle of the discovery CMDB kind of areas? And where is it? Where was it? Where does it come in service now?
Yeah, I mean, it has changed a good bit over the years, and people's mindsets and approach to the CMDB is matured a great deal as well. Historically, it's been looked at as an inventory tool. You just load in a spreadsheet and, well, hey, we've got a CMDB. You can associate an incident or change to it. But obviously, the problem with that is you load that in on day one. By day 30, it's stale and erroneous, and it's not likely to be in a trusted state. So leveraging any form of automation is going to be the best possible way to populate the CMDB. And there's no better automation than discovery itself. ServiceNow Discovery is obviously built to populate the ServiceNow class model. So you can guarantee that that data is going to fall into the appropriate places that you might not have that same guarantee with an integration point. But in terms of how we've actually progressed the products over the better part of the last 5 years, we do have more options available to us now than just relying purely on discovery. And when we have conversations with our customers, we try to take it in a much more federated approach to populating a CMDB. So that's understanding where we've got different data sources and sources of truth that's going to address a use case. And the huge benefit that we have as of the last 6 months is the release of what we call service graph connectors. These service graph connectors are pre-built and approved by ServiceNow, and they're going to essentially take a payload from whatever third-party endpoint, and a lot of the common IT tools are already supported, and it's going to process that payload through the identification reconciliation engine to make sure it goes into the right table inside the CMDB. And this allows you to marry up various different sources to all work harmoniously together. So we've come a long way in recent years to not just rely on one tool set, but having a federated approach of trusted data. So customers, if you haven't heard of Service Graph Connectors before, they're all available on the ServiceNow store. You can go out and make sure that the third-party product you care about is available for you to enable on your system. Would you say any of the customers that you've had conversations with recently have even aware of the capability of a Service Graph Connector?
Yeah, I know I've had quite a few, recently that they may not know what it is coming into the conversation, but they're starting to really see the value in those service ground connectors, and really it's really helping that ServiceNow has more and more that's really out of box integrations, more plug and play, getting those up to date and kind of rolling, and then being able to have that trusted CMDB. Which kind of comes to a big question a lot of customers kind of have is, how do I know I can trust that CMDB? What has been your aspects of understanding and helping the customer understand, like how can they know it's trusted?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely poses a challenge, and there's a few different techniques that's available to us. One thing is trying to identify where gaps in data may exist, and it's difficult to report on a non-existent entity. But if you can, again, approach it from that like federated population method, if you tie it in from various different sources, you can plug the gaps in your CMDB that may have existed previously. So there's a few reports that I like to do with customers. A couple of examples could be if you do a API call to vCenter, for instance, you can get all of the virtual machines that's hosted on that or managed by that vCenter instance. You can then pair that up against what kind of server records you've got in your CMDB and identify any gaps that might be coming through from either discovery or your SCCM Intune integration, and you can marry that up together. So once you've got an idea of what's potentially missing, you can then start evaluating the actual quality of data in the CMDB. And since the Helsinki release of the ServiceNow platform, we actually have a few out-of-the-box tools that assist us with that assessment of the health of the CMDB. And I'll just take a quick moment and I can share my screen. I just want to quickly overview what that health dashboard would look like inside an environment. So as I mentioned, this has been available since the Helsinki release, but it still seems to me that more than half of the customers that I have conversation with are not aware of its capabilities. And it's relatively straightforward in terms of what it's actually presenting, but it's of tremendous value when you want to actually assess how much should you be trusting your CMDB. So just going over a quick glance of what this actually includes is it provides an overall scorecard for the health of your CMDB, and it's made up of 3 different widgets that feed into that scorecard. So we have the completeness, compliance, and the correctness of our data. The completeness, as the name suggests, it's how complete is the certain CIs and classes that I care about inside the CMDB. So you might have a recommended field to say that all server records have to have a technical owner. This is going to do a scheduled job that runs on a daily basis to assess to see how well you actually populate in that data that you truly care about. On the compliance side, this is where we can ensure that there's certain rules that's been defined. So you might say that all production servers should have a relationship to a application service so that you can tie it back to what it's being used for to deliver value to the business. You could use this for effective chargeback or for assignment rules and approval. And then the final widget that we see here is what I consider to be the most important, because this is really what customers are looking at and your customers are looking at in terms of, do I trust the data that's being presented to me? So this is doing an analysis job to try and identify any duplicate data that might be out there that you can then do some form of remediation on. As of the Madrid release, I believe there's a deduplication wizard that allows you to identify a parent CI and bind various different other tasks that may be part of the duplicate to the parent CI. We have a orphan status where we're looking to make sure that there's appropriate relationships between 2 different CIs. And then one of the most important ones is flagging and identifying stale records in the CMDB. If we're not refreshing that data on a reoccurrence, then there's no real indication to say that we should trust the accuracy of that data. So we can control what this staleness metric looks like and flag any data that's come through that hasn't been refreshed in, say, 14 days. And you may want to go and identify why your source of truth is not updating that record. So it's quite easy to configure this dashboard. By default, these health dashboard jobs are turned off. So you can come in, you can enable these jobs, and then review what your results look like. And don't be afraid that if your results aren't all that great, if it's not a high score, that's something that you're going to track as a KPI as you start to make continual service improvement on your CMDB.
Where do you typically kind of tell customers to focus on first? Say this dashboard popped up and you saw a lot of red. Where's the return on value that they should really focus on?
Yeah, so the ones that I'll be focusing immediately on, recommended fields, because we, again, at the end of the day, we're always trying to address use cases. We're not just trying to build a massive data lake. We want to work with our consumers of the CMDB to understand what they care about, and then making sure that we're populating those fields to address that use cases effectively. So an example that I have quite commonly is talking to a security operations team. They often have their own spreadsheet or an access database of their own inventory of the various different devices that security has to interact with. We want to try and retire those kinds of siloed products or siloed spreadsheets and get them to leverage the CMDB effectively. So having a conversation with them to understand what their use cases are, extending the class model to address those use cases. And it could be as simple as just saying like a true false flag on a server to say if it's PCI compliant or not. They store that in a spreadsheet. We want to store it in the CMDB. That PCI flag we'll put as a recommended field, and then we can track how complete we actually are on that data in terms of being populated. So I'd be focused on the recommended first, and then the staleness of that data as well. We don't want to be reflecting poor, out-of-date data. So if it's not being refreshed, we're not likely to trust it.
Mark, I wanted to comment on the orphan CI. So the last customer I actually worked for, we would create reports for orphaned CIs and orphan relationships. So every CI class that we onboarded, we actually had to put in a script include and run a report off of it. And using this capability, I feel like it would have just made it so much easier and there'd be so much less overhead. So like I agree with the jobs, just turn them on and start looking at this and seeing what you can get away from if you're doing stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's taken out a lot of that legwork that you would have had to do from like an analysis perspective by yourself. And I remember doing these kind of, in a sense, assessments in a much more manual fashion or scripting out certain things, certain activities to output it. But when it's all right here and it's just a matter of enabling the jobs, there really isn't much of a reason to not put this in play and just see what it's working with. And then from there, tailoring it to suit your needs. You go into the CI class manager and you can manipulate which fields you actually consider to be recommended. So it may not be a one size fits all with the out of the box configuration, but as soon as you start to understand how these rules operate, you can start tailoring it to fit your needs.
Can I mention one more thing too? So I'm all about workspaces and whatnot right now. Actually, if you set this up, the CMDB health dashboards, as far as how you view CIs in the workspace, it actually will click into this dashboard. So you can kind of see the health of your CI right in the workspace itself, and then click into this dashboard for a more full view right from the workspace. So they've tied that together for you out of the box if you're looking to use that kind of interface as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had the original idea of build it and they will come, and unfortunately, very few people actually did come. So they're trying to push it front and center now to get customers to enable this. Because, I mean, the reason we're having this conversation is CMDB still poses a massive challenge for a lot of organizations, but it is that foundation of the ServiceNow platform. So we want to try and make sure that we're maintaining a healthy CMDB, and tools such as this, and some of the tools that tie into this, like that deduplication wizard, is what can help you take some strides forward. So I know one of the early questions that was put forward was in regards to other changes that's been going on in terms of population methods to populate our CMDB. And one very recent update that you may not have seen or customers might not have seen is the capability now of using an installed agent on the endpoint to report back to the mid server to collect the data. So we have this concept called an agent client collector. We originally released it for monitoring purposes and collecting metrics in Q3 last year. But in the tail end of April, we actually released it for the visibility SKU as well. So not only can Discovery operate in an agentless fashion using a service account, but we can actually install an agent on that endpoint now. So that's particularly useful. Taking a scenario I know is a common pain point for a lot of customers is in the development environments. Sometimes a virtual machine is only up for a couple of days and then shut back down, or just left in an orphan state and they don't join the domain. So it's very difficult for us to capture that into the CMDB. But baking that agent into the base image, it's going to report back as soon as it comes online. So then you have that full asset lifecycle from provisioning to retirement, all there as an audit trail inside your CMDB.
I think that brings up a good point too, Mark, that we saw a lot, take off last year is we had a lot of customers that we turned into a very remote organization across the world with the pandemic that happened, and a lot of organizations didn't have laptops that were already assigned to individuals, so they ran into the situation where they had to rapidly assign out machines so people could take them home and work still. But how do they keep track of those machines? So being able to discover them even when they're not on the network constantly, was a very big value for them. Especially because discovery, when it runs, you got to be connected to the network for it to discover it. Whereas the agent one will kind of help in that scenario and keep track of where all their assets are and make sure that asset lifecycle continues even with everyone out of the office. So that's a great feature that is coming out.
I mean, asset management was certainly significantly impacted by the major modern operational transition that we went through, or a lot of organizations went through in the last year. All of a sudden, we had organizations having to shift to this remote working environment. And it was more like an emergency procedure to get these devices and assets issued out to individuals. There's definitely gaps that's out there still with organizations in terms of asset management, but using the CMDB effectively, you can then have that agent could be installed or still approach it from an agentless fashion or tying into SCCM. We can start to understand who those assets are being assigned to. So as soon as they call the help desk, open up a case, we can use that user record to understand all of the assets that's being assigned to that individual to try and get the right knowledge, the right information to your operator's hands, and also the history of that device. If it's been a reoccurring issue that's been coming through time and time again, then it may be time to retire that device rather than spending the additional money on maintenance and the hours that goes into supporting that individual with that device. So configuration management and asset management go hand in hand, and we want to make sure that we're supporting all the operations through that life cycle.
You're reminding me of my help desk days with the reoccurring issues. If I would have had that in my help desk days, that would have been amazing.
I mean, it's brilliant there. You got this call coming through from customer XYZ, you've got his profile, you've got all of the assets that's assigned to him. You can even see what kind of software that he's subscribed to. So just everything, the more information that we have, and the shorter the duration that we have to handle that call, and that's the dreamland right there. And then even taking it a little step further, maybe trying to be much more proactive where that call doesn't even need to occur. So I know there's all kinds of different maturity paths that you can take on the platform. On my side, slightly selfishly, one of my favorite aspects is event management. Event management, I mean, that's dealing with the health of your services and trying to restore the health of that services before the end users actually recognize any form of impact. And that's a great use case there for tying it into the CMDB. Being able to take the raw monitoring data coming through from the various different monitoring tools, aligning it to the CMDB to try and do some form of rationalization, understanding the impact of that event, and being able to prioritize that event effectively. And then if you can take it a little bit further with it, some more maturity, we can start tying in some automation for automated remediation. So before any ticket gets assigned or incident gets assigned to an operator, the system has already picked up that this has experiences some form of issue. It's passed out what the actual challenge may be. It may have seen something similar to it in the past, and it's kicked off a integration hub flow to go and perform some form of remediation. And this remediation may only buy you an extra 30 minutes, but that's 30 minutes of your service desk not getting calls coming through that this service is being temperamental, and gives you time for your L2, L3 operators to do their due diligence.
And I think that's a good point too, with the proactive piece. Not even just considering your internal IT and your internal organization, but also start to talk about customer service and your actual customers for your organization, and how customer service management can really tie into IT service management and make that connection. So when an event happens, you have your IT teams going after it, but you can also proactively alert your customers to prevent them from having to call and sit on hold and be impactful to them. So I think that really all ties together in giving that kind of larger picture of where ServiceNow is really taking the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. It's acting as that trigger on the floor, and those CMDB is going to be that hub that's going to spin off those different process areas. So you can automatically create a case that's going to proactively notify the customer. You can have the incident that's going to go to assign to the appropriate group. And then you also have the visibility into potentially what the change was that happened previous to that incident. because we have found that 80% of unplanned outages are caused by unplanned changes. So having all of that information right there, all in one workplace, that's what drives customer satisfaction. All right. Any other final comments before we wrap up this session?
No, this has been like a really great overview of some of the new features in Quebec, but also, some things that you can do in your CMDB that would have a really high return on investment right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any other further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But yeah, that's all we have time for today. And thank you very much for tuning in to GlideChat.